Tell me, Henrik, why are you going all in on AI?
Because to me, this is a tool that gives you superpowers, and I think that's inspiring.
So nothing less than superpowers. Well, that's a lot. Explain, why is it giving is it giving us superpowers?
Because it's like you have this brain floating around in the cloud, which you can use to augment your own brain in a sense. And to me, I just noticed it helps. It helped me get stuff done faster and better. And I noticed when I help other people, it's the same. So it's inspiring to both use as a tool, but also to share with others. Plus, the fact that it's improving at an exponential rate means your superpowers are also growing with time, which is interesting.
So, but some of the things you just said, you might have said about the whole digitalization thing. So there must be one major change that you experienced. Was there some specific moment for you when you said, well, this is a real different thing, this is a big changer? Some people call it an iPhone moment you personally
Yeah,
had.
that's a good metaphor. Yeah, there was actually, because ChatGPT, when it came along, was very impressive, but it was a bit of a toy. But then when GPT-4 came along, I started experimenting in it, and I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to see what happens if I give this challenging work. And then I was kind of blown away. So my first kind of iPhone moment was when I was writing an article, and then I asked it for feedback, but it was a long article. So GPT told me, give it to me in pieces. So I gave it one chapter at a time. But when I gave it a chapter, it gave me very valuable, I would expect from a professional editor. That surprised me. What surprised me even more, though, was that in the feedback, it said, I suggest you mention what you're going to talk about in the next chapter. And here's my suggestion what you can write. And then it predicted what I was going to write in the next chapter. And it did it surprisingly accurately. And every time I gave it a chapter, it predicted the next chapter. And after a while, it started writing the next chapter for me, the whole thing, with my voice and my examples. And I was like, really surprised. I had to tell it to stop. I want this to be my article. Just give me feedback. Don't write it for me. But my iPhone moment was realizing it could write my article for me and nobody would probably notice. So that was one. The other one was when I was coding. And same thing there. I noticed that I could give it, when my skills as a prompt engineer improved, I could give it, instead of writing code, I would just describe what I want to achieve. And if I gave it the right context and a good description of what I want to achieve, it wrote the code and it worked. And I was like, this would have taken me days. And now it just did it, in minutes. And that was kind of mind blowing. So that's when I decided that this is going to be what I focus on.
Okay, so you really had your iPhone moment writing an article or a book.
Article and
So
code, yeah.
yeah, or coding, yes. So now you call yourself an AI whisperer. What's the daily routine of an AI whisperer?
Yeah, I had to call me something, and I figure it's a metaphor for a horse whisperer, dog whisperer, someone who tries to figure out how do I communicate with this other being, and that's kind of what I found that the biggest limitation is in you as a human when you're using this technology. Most of the limitations in AI are actually your limitations as a user or as a prompt engineer, which some people call. I like the term prompt designer better. And then AI whisperer was just, I found a more fun version of prompt engineer, kind of. But to me, it's about learning how to interact with this strange being.
Okay.
And my metaphor for that is being an AI whisperer. So I try to learn that myself and then help others do that as well.
So what are you whispering to other people when you're whispering about AI? Is there like one or two major messages on the scale of a person, an individual, and perhaps even more interesting on the scale of an organization? How do you whisper to organizations too?
Yeah, I tend to talk there instead of whisper, but I think the main message is that this thing may seem very hyped, and we've been through a lot of different technology hypes. I think it's important to recognize this is different. This hype is valid, so to speak.
Mhm.
It really is a revolution that is changing our society at the core. And when you realize that, then that's an important mental threshold to get over. And then the second thing is then to understand that to be part of this strange new world, you need to understand this technology. So I would say use it, learn it, apply it, experiment, do dumb things, and make it part of your company or your personal habits. And then that'll put you in a better position to manage in whatever weird future we're heading towards.
So like one of the major messages is something like do it, go,
Yeah,
try, work with
yeah.
it, do experiments, that kind of stuff.
Bring it in as a colleague,
Mhm.
even though it's not perfect.
Okay. Okay, so as you mentioned, the hype cycle, because that's one of the things I'm working on right now. I think the first release of ChatGPT 3.5 was in November, like 1.25 years ago.
Yeah.
I believe even Gartner is seeing generative AI now at the top of the hype cycle. So after the top of the hype cycle, we're going down in the trough of disillusionment.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm talking to CIOs about how to react to that, how to manage that. Any specific suggestions here? What should we do if we're now going down the slope on the hype cycle?
I would say don't believe it, because those models are based on historical precedent. We've never been through this before. Those models don't work, I think. The people creating those models have probably not experienced the technology firsthand, so they're just looking at the past hype cycles, and I think you can't really compare.
So you say this one is different, not only that it's a major change, but I mean the hype cycle is not really predicting anything about how big the technology is. The hype cycle
Yeah.
is predicting that it's going to go dip down and then
Yeah,
it's going to go back up.
I think I would ask the Gartner group, where are we in the hype cycle of electricity right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're bottomed out but on a high productivity, aren't we?
Yeah, but it hasn't. Okay, unless I misunderstood how the
We
model
flattened
works,
out, so to say.
but it's something that changes our society permanently.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like it kind of goes away. It's more like we get pushed into a new equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that's important to kind of recognize that we're being pushed into a new equilibrium, and we don't know exactly what that is.
Okay.
But if you compare it to other technologies, let's say for example blockchain or a VR, or there tends to be this like oh my god, and then it kind of dies down a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't quite as big as we thought.
Mm-hmm.
That cycle, if that's what they're referring to, that I don't
Mm-hmm.
think is going to happen with AI.
Okay.
I think it'll more like exponential, just keep going.
Okay, I understand that. So really work with it, try to profit, to make the best of it, use it, take
Yeah.
advantage of it. Okay. You have a very strong background about working with organizations, how to organize, how to better collaborate. We both know Conway's law, saying that the organization and the product interdepend very, very much. That they correlate very much. So, what's your suggestion? How should companies, how should organizations now reorganize, change to be able to work with the new possibilities and to make the most of it?
I think as a starting point, you need to go back and you need to question all your assumptions. Look at how you work today, your current structure. Maybe you work in teams, for example. If you work in an agile way, they're probably cross-functional teams, maybe 4 or 5 people working in sprints or similar. Go back and question everything. For every piece of that, why do we do sprints? Why do we have teams? Why do we do this? Why does that? So kind of list all the aspects of how you work and question it. What are the underlying assumptions? Because some of those assumptions now change. For example, cross-functional teams are based on the assumption that if we don't have all the different skills, then we can't deliver the product. And we need to have these different people to cover the different skills. But now one person who is really good at prompt engineering has all the skills. So 1 or 2 people that are really good at AI will outperform a cross-functional team easily. And that changes the whole nature of how we work. So I would say the agile principles, as an example, are probably the same, but the practices are going to change completely, probably. Maybe sprints disappear. We work in 1-day cycles. If you have small teams of 1 or 2 people, you don't need meetings at all. The daily stand-up goes away. But of course, now since you have smaller teams, you're going to have more teams. So you still need coordination across teams.
Yes.
So there's all these questions, and I don't know what the answer is, but what I'm sure of is that they're changing. So all of our underlying assumptions of how to work effectively kind of need to be revisited, and we need to start experimenting a lot.
Okay. Even faster, question the assumption that we need heterogeneous teams because we need the specific parts of knowledge, because now we have all the knowledge available at our fingertips. But if I understand correctly, you do say like the Agile values, like the Agile manifesto, that still is very much in place.
I think so. I haven't seen any indication of any of that not being valid anymore, because it's high-level principles like if we're going to build a good product, we should work together with the people that are going to use it. And that's true even if the person building it is an AI, for example. and working in small cycles instead of big bang is true even if it's an AI. In fact, maybe even more so. If I'm working with an AI model, if I give a waterfall specification to an AI model, it will produce mediocre results. But if I give it user stories and work in increments and give feedback, it'll give better results. So it's kind of the principles I think are probably similar at least.
Okay, similar, perhaps even more important, and also in a very in a state where everything is changing at the same time. Perhaps some points that we can rely on.
Even things like what is a good, if you're using an agile approach, what is a good backlog item, for example? What is a good user story? The difference is, I mean, that still applies, but instead of a product owner or something like someone in that kind of role trying to craft a user story together with a team or a customer, and then the team implements it. Now, as a developer, you are a product owner essentially, because you don't need to write all that code. If you can write a good user story and provide the context, then the model will write the code for you. But it's still valid to be able to craft a good user story. So a lot of the skills are still valid, but some of the practices are being turned upside down probably.
Okay, great. One more thing we have to talk about, the autonomous agents. On your really wonderful video you did on AI, you gave that some room, and you said this is like one of the big changes, and if I understand it correctly, one of the big changes that are really just now going onto the stage and that are going to make a major difference.
Yeah, this is what I work on personally almost full time for the past half year. I think it's very interesting, the agent thing, and what it means. People can define it a little differently, but what I define it as is, if you take something like ChatGPT is passive. It does nothing until you ask it for something. So an agent runs on its own. It's running all the time, doing some, just like a team, right? A team has a mission and it works on it autonomously, similar with an agent. And the second thing is they have tools. So for example, let's say you have an agent that is working in your development team, right? What tools does it need? Well, it needs access to GitHub, it needs access to your code, maybe it needs access to a database, it needs access to the internet, things like that. You give it these tools and you let it run on its own, you give it a mission. So maybe his mission is fix bugs and clean up the code. So he'll join the stand-ups and on the videos, and he'll say, okay, listen, I fixed these 18 bugs yesterday and I made a PR for that. And I have the questions about this. So now we have an autonomous agent that is doing things on its own, but in collaboration with humans. So it's not something you just let. It's. I think the magic is the combination, that this thing is not working entirely alone. It's just like any good team member, you collaborate.
Yeah, but
so that's what I mean by an agent.
But so that really is one more step on the ladder, isn't it? Because if I talk about co-piloting with, for example, ChatGPT, then it's still me who is specifically asking the machine, tell me this, can you answer that? And I very much give it some direction. But an agent has its own tools. He has his job, his mission, and then he starts off.
Yeah, but it's also a team player though, because for example, maybe the agreement is do bug fixes, but make a PR out of it. And then we can have discussions about it and give feedback. So sometimes he may propose things like, I noticed this part of the code is quite messy, so I've suggested a refactoring. What do you think? So I would say it's a collaboration where it really, if you just say do your own thing and I don't care, then it won't be as useful.
But so this is rather in like an individual with his own mission, and but still has to be integrated in a team. Like then we're back to obviously agile topics like being a good team.
Or I guess I would even say it as it's a team member that shares the mission of your team. But we give them certain areas to focus on.
But still an important thing more than just passive generative AI. So that's a
and that technology is here now, so it's very interesting. It's just not really well packaged yet. So a lot of tools are, but this is kind of where we're heading. So I think my guess is within a year we will consider this normal.
Okay, so also one of the major differences is there that the technology isn't as mature there as it's, for example, I mean, nothing is mature so far and still growing at an incredible rate, but it's even more in the beginning than generative AI.
It's early adopter stuff. Like it works, but it's not as easy and accessible as you can do right now. You can go to ChatGPT and it just works. Here's a little more like there's a bunch of different tools and they're not all polished yet.
Perhaps a short word on one thing, one other thing. We do have all those major changes, even more coming up than we've already experienced. How is it going to change the economy and the society? Is it going to be like another push for the big corporate world, or is this the big change for small companies to get on the same level like the big corporates? Any feeling, any idea, any knowledge about that?
My gut feel there, having worked a bit with both small and big companies, is that the small companies will have a big advantage here because it's easier for them to change their habits. Larger companies have more habits and structures that are harder to change. And if you imagine the team I told you about, right? You have a team of 1 or 2 people with an AI that is autonomous. If you have a company that makes that their standard, they're going to outperform much larger companies quite easily. So I think we're entering times where it's going to be quite stressful to be an executive at a big company, probably, because you're going to need to change things that maybe have been the same for many decades.
Okay. So because I don't have to manage a silo for legal stuff, for, I don't know, computational stuff, for, I don't know, customer care stuff, but I do it all in small teams because I have all the competencies and all the profiles in just one small team of 2 or 3 individuals, and so I don't need a major structure like a big company there.
Well, you might need the structure anyway, but I think it's more like the change. If you have a big company, then you probably have lots of fixed roles and rules, and there's just more bureaucracy. And now we need to revisit that a lot. We need to radically change how we run companies, and that's naturally easier for smaller companies to do than big companies.
Okay. So.
But that's just my speculation.
Yeah, okay, but still, I mean, we're all thinking about and we're searching. Yeah. Perhaps looking into the future, which is always a tough thing to do, but perhaps what's your advice for my students, people who are young, like in the 20s, early 20s now? What's the big thing they should focus on because they have their whole work life coming up in a world of artificial intelligence? Like 1 or 2 tips from your side. What should they do? What should they focus on?
I would say mainly make this technology your friend. Make it part of your life. Think of it as a tool that'll make your life easier, but also make you more valuable on the market. So nobody knows where the future is headed because it's so chaotic right now. There's so much uncertainty. But one thing that I think is a fairly safe bet is that as a student, if this tool is part of your day-to-day work, if you become a naturally good prompt engineer and a prompt designer, then you'll have a much better job prospect going forward. But if you resist it or hide from this technology and like, oh, that's scary, I don't want to look at it, then you're likely to run into trouble.
So do it like Henrik, go all in.
Use it. Yeah. You don't need to become an evangelist, but just think of it kind of like Google. Imagine a student who enters a job market and has never used Google or doesn't know how to search. It's going to be hard, right? So it needs to be part of your day-to-day work. And I would say it's kind of similar here.
Okay. Henrik, thank you very much.
Thank you. Interesting conversation.